All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, one of the worst kept secrets in collegiate athletics is no more, as all signs point to Texas State becoming a card carrying member of the new Pac 12 conference. The Pac 12 has reportedly extended the offer to Texas State, and Texas State is expected to accept. And Texas State's arrival will give the new Pac 12 eight full time members, the eight full time members that the NCAA has required to have them in place or have in place by next July. The road to this moment for Oregon State and Washington State, who nearly 2 years ago were left for dead when USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon all decided to leave the original Pac 12 for the Big Ten, while Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado all left for the Big 12, and then Stanford and Cal decided to partner up with the ACC. And with all of that said, with all of these heavy hitters that I'm talking about leaving the original Pac 12, you just have to wonder what could have been for that league. Okay. Now, with that said, many people expected Oregon State and Washington State to roll over, but they did the exact opposite as they rolled up their sleeves and they went to work. The legal battle that Oregon State and Washington State had with the 10 departing members of the Pac 12, because remember, everybody just wanted to like get together, divvy up the money, and keep it going. But Oregon State and Washington State read the fine line and basically said, "Hey, once you've given your notice as far as leaving the Pac-12, you no longer have a say in things." And subsequently, the courts sided with Oregon State and Washington State, and they have the Pac-12's war chest at their disposal. Okay, then Oregon State and Washington State went on to basically tell now former Pac 12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff, hey, your services are no longer needed. And they replaced him with Teresa Gold. And unlike Kliavkoff, Gold has shown that she has the best interest of the Pac 12 in mind. The football scheduling partnership with the Mountain West that was put into play for the 2024 season. And of course, it was one of those where it didn't go as expected, for everybody because it actually, provided more bad than good for anything. It was one less conference game for all of the teams in the Mountain West. It was something that was agreed upon by Kliavkoff, not Gold. And, a lot of people, with that said, expected, well, Oregon State's just going to shift their way into the Mountain West. And Oregon State and Washington State said, hey, it's not going down like that. On the flip side, of course, Oregon State and Washington State were able to get Boise State, Utah State, San Diego State, Fresno State, and Colorado State all to leave the Mountain West and join them in the new Pac 12. And then, of course, a big move from the basketball aspect when the Pac 12 was able to get Gonzaga to leave the West Coast Conference, which is definitely going to help their basketball footprint. And of course, if you're hearing a trend here, Gonzaga is the only school in the new Pacific 12 conference. I'm calling it Pacific 12 because that's what it is, even though all of the schools ain't exactly on the West Coast. But nonetheless, the new Pac 12, as far as Gonzaga goes, they're the only school in this league so far that does not have the name state in their title. And on top of that, maybe, just maybe, this league, this new Pac 12, can go on to get some sponsorship done with Allstate. Just throwing it out there. But nonetheless, now the Pac 12 can breathe because they are officially back in business. But of course, the question is, are they done? We know that in the past, Memphis, Tulane, UTSA, and South Florida, all out of the American Athletic Conference, have been on the Pac-12's radar. The same thing can be said about UNLV from the Mountain West. And of course, I've asked and answered this question before on this platform. I'm going to throw it out there again because people are going to say, well, why didn't a Memphis or a Tulane or UNLV join the Pac 12? I think for Memphis and Tulane and the other schools out of the American Conference, I think the first thing was, hey, they were looking for the Pac 12 to pay their exit fees. And I simply don't see Washington State and Oregon State paying $27 million to get Memphis out of the American Athletic Conference. Also, there were the travel logistics. And honestly, you can't blame Memphis for that. Okay, they're in Tennessee. The bulk of these schools are on or in the West region, so to speak. And there's a travel cost concept. I totally get it. It was going to be something where you're going to have to make it worth their while, and of course, to get a Memphis to join as a full time member, they were going to have to bring somebody else west with them. Okay, so it just simply didn't work out for UNLV. And here is the intriguing thing because I've talked about this and I'll talk about it again. You heard rumors initially. Well, there could be a reverse merger where all of the Mountain West schools would go to the Pac-12 or with Oregon State and Washington State, or Oregon State and Washington State to simply join the Mountain West. But Oregon State and Washington State didn't want to do turkey or talk business with all of those schools. But nonetheless, they did get five. I feel personally that if you were going to go in, if you're Oregon State and Washington State, you should have gone in enough to make sure or ensure that your league was afloat, meaning that you shouldn't have stopped at five Mountain West schools. You should have tried to go for six. Okay, I totally understand it from a financial aspect as well. But I think just for the sake of argument, UNLV would have been a nice addition to what you have, and it definitely would have made a lot of sense basketball wise. Putting UNLV, keeping UNLV in a league with San Diego State, as well as adding a Gonzaga to that mix. But nonetheless, here we are, and of course, UNLV. I feel, from an outsider's perspective, I feel like they're happy to be and remain in the Mountain West. Why? Because the Mountain West sweetened the pot, and they made it more worth the while of UNLV and Air Force by giving them a bigger taste of the gate. So, with that said, would or could we see the Pac-12 try to circle back at some point and get any of these schools? You never say never in this world. Okay. There are rumors, and they're only rumors, okay, that Memphis is talking with the Pac 12 about being a football only member. There's also rumors about Memphis looking to take all of their other sports to the Big East Conference. We got to wait and see how that happens. Again, I'm just saying it's a rumor. I'm not here trying to act like I know something that I simply don't know. But nonetheless, I think that could be a possibility. Okay, but you'd have to make it worth Memphis' while. And of course, I don't if Memphis were to leave the American for a deal like that, I don't think that they would go by themselves. I think they would try to take a Tulane with them. But we got to wait and see when it how all of that is said and done. UNLV is not going anywhere as far as due to their grants of rights with the Mountain West. So anybody who's hopeful for UNLV to come to the Pac-12, in my opinion, it's just hope. Okay, but getting back to Texas State joining up with the Pac-12, could their arrival possibly sway a team like UTSA to join that league? I mean, it would be two Texas schools. They're about an hour apart from each other, so it's a natural rivalry. But like a Memphis and like a Tulane, UTSA is also in the American Athletic Conference. And of course, the big question is, does the Pac 12 want to sit back and help them pay those exit fees? And I'm not holding my breath on that. So I am going to say no. But the meat and potatoes of this, okay, because we saw the Pac 12 get the first leg of their new media deal, which is going to be with CBS. And there's going to be more legs to this. That deal with CBS runs through 2031. The things that you got to pay attention to, in my opinion, the American Athletic Conference's media deal runs through 2032. The Mountain West grants of rights run through 2032 as well. That's going to be a factor in things because the Pac-12 already has CBS set up. They're going to have some games on CBS, some on the CBS Sports Network. Okay, um, there's going to be more media partners. More than likely, the CW, or I would go to bed, and I would bet the house on the CW once again continuing their relationship with the new Pac-12. So that's a given. The possibility of an ESPN as well. And also, I feel like, you should not count out Turner because, like I said, after losing the NBA package, Turner has some money to spend on sports. And of course, that sub licensing with ESPN right now for them to televise a couple of first round college football playoff games. I think Turner wants to get back into that football wise, and they could have themselves a game every week. And again, Teresa Gold, the conference commissioner for the Pac 12, is looking at it, trying to get as many media outlets as possible to televise and showcase your product in order to get as many eyes watching what you can do. And of course, the more media outlets you have, the more money that you are going to be able to generate for your conference. So when it's all said and done, I think the schools who didn't, partner up with the Pac-12 as of yet, they're going to sit back and see what this new league is going to get money wise. B, they're going to sit back and see what it looks like, and maybe several years down the road they could come back and revisit it when the the amount that it would cost for you to leave your respective league is not what it is. Also, there's the factor of the Big 12 conference, and of course, would the Big 12 look to poach? The Big 12's media deal, all right, that runs through 2031. The Big 12, definitely, first and foremost, they're going to have a more lucrative television deal than the Pac 12 has. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If that was the case, some of those original members of, or former members now of the Pac 12 that are in the Big 12 would not have left in the first place. Nonetheless, there are people out there in some schools in the West region that, are holding out hope that, the Big 12 will add their school to the fray. I'm not here to say that it's not going to happen because it's a possibility. I get it. But we've got to see how this 16 team league plays out overall and how the 16 schools that are currently in the Big 12 conference, how they get along and work through things and how comfortable do they feel. And then, of course, a couple of years down the road, how much would they want to add somebody? Because again, in adding, another school or schools, that means you got another mouth to feed, meaning that you got to divvy up the money a little bit differently. So it's not a guarantee that the Big 12 is going to come according. So when it's all said and done, you really can't hold out hope and say, "Hey, that's my exit strategy." You got to still work on something for yourself right now, in my opinion. So when it's all said and done, the Pac-12 looks like they have some stability, but of course, like everybody else, they've got to be able to try to sustain their league through the next round of television deals because you never know when a bigger conference might come calling. It ain't going to be the Big Ten. It ain't going to be the SEC. I'll tell you that much right now. I think the only way that at this point that the Big Ten or the eight or the SEC were to add schools were to be if a Big 12 or an ACC were to fold, and I don't see it happening at this point. I don't see the ACC trying to add more schools out west. Possibly the Big 12, but I'm not holding out my breath on it. So I think stability wise, the Pac 12 definitely has some working in their favor. But again, you never know what's going to happen down the road because it's that never ending cycle of realignment in college football, or as I like to refer to it as simply the trickle down effect of schools seeking more money because when these schools leave for different leagues, 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, it's about money. But nonetheless, for the Pac 12, they will now open up shop in the great state of Texas, a big state, a state that is known for its football and athletic talent overall. Now, when you think about Texas, you think about a lot of FBS programs in that state. Got the Pac-12 represented now, the ACC, the SEC, the Conference USA, the American Athletic Conference, and then of course the Big 12. And now for the Pac-12, you ask yourself, how did it get to this point for them and Texas State? I always feel, and this is just my opinion here, but I always feel that Texas State was a fallback option for the Pac-12. I kind of feel like the Pac-12 knew that they could have Texas State if they wanted them. Texas State wanted to be in the Pac-12, and I think the most telling part of that was when the Mountain West reached out to Texas State after their 5 schools went to join Oregon State and Washington State in the new Pac-12, and Texas State basically told the Mountain West, "Thanks, but no thanks." You could see the writing on the wall because for Texas State to turn down the Mountain West, there was only one other option. You're not going to leave the Sun Belt at this point for Conference USA if you're Texas State. You're not going to leave the Sun Belt for the American Athletic Conference if you're Texas State at this point, which meant that they were hoping for the Pac 12. And I think what the Pac 12 thought they could do, and this is just my opinion, I feel like they figured if they got enough big players to leave the Mountain West to join them, that the Mountain West are simply, keel over and fold, kind of like what people expected Washington State and Oregon State to do when everybody else left the Pac-10. But just like we've seen Oregon State and Washington State fight to preserve their league, that's the same thing that we've seen from the Mountain West. They're bringing in a Northern Illinois for football. They're bringing in UTEP as well. So they're trying to, hold on to what they have. And like I said before, sweetening the pot for both UNLV and Air Force was a big deal for them as they're looking to, keep, their league on solid ground. But when it's all said and done, you look at Texas State. They've only been operating at the FBS level since 2012, and they've made some progress. Okay, they spent 1 year in the now defunct Western Athletic Conference before joining the Sun Belt. People talk about the enrollment at Texas State, more than 40,000 kids, a lot of resources in the great state of Texas that could be spent on this program, and I think it's going to be a gift that keeps on giving. And if you're the Pac-12, I don't know what the numbers are going to look like, but you more than likely are not going to have to give Texas State a full share right away because even a partial share from that football money is going to be much more than what they could have gotten or were getting in the Sun Belt. And of course, that means you could kind of divvy up the money among some of the other schools. We got to wait and see how that plays out. And of course, for the Sun Belt's not going to skip a beat with Texas State leaving because they already knew this was coming. And, you hear the stories, and it's more than likely true about Louisiana Tech just leaving Conference USA and sliding into things for the Sun Belt. And I think Louisiana Tech in the Sun Belt definitely works. Okay, that's just my opinion. But getting back to the Pac 12, their commissioner, Teresa Gold, she continues to work hard to deliver to this league what they want. And like I said before, it's just a matter of seeing what the next steps are going to be in their media deal. And it's kind of like that snowball effect because a lot of people for a long time were saying, why is this thing taking so long? Why is this not getting done? X, Y, and Z. And I think we're starting to see things speed up because they just announced the first part of their media deal. They wanted to get that media deal done before they went and got their 8th full-time member, which they quickly did with Texas State. And I think now the rest of the parameters for this media deal are definitely going to fall into place. They knew that they had themselves a deadline to get this done before July of next year. in order to be a full-time league. They've done that. They knew that the exit fees for Texas State to leave the Sun Belt were about to increase after July 1st. So, it wasn't pressure, but you definitely, if you're the Pac-12, you wanted to go out there and get this thing done. And speaking of exit fees doubling, that's why you're not going to see any more. Another reason why you're not going to see any more schools from the Mountain West joining the Pac-12, because guess what? Those exit fees have increased now as well. And of course, there's a lot of bad blood right now between the schools that are in the Pac-12 and the remaining schools in the Mountain West. I don't see Gloria Navarez, the commissioner of the Mountain West, and Teresa Gold exchanging pleasantries around Christmas or any other holiday anytime soon. But nonetheless, you look at this and you look at the work that Teresa Gold and company have done to keep the Pac-12 afloat, and you just have to ask yourself, would things have been a lot different for the Pac 12 if Teresa Gold had been in charge and not George Kliavkoff? And I'm going to sit back and I'm going to say yes, because George Kliavkoff and his predecessor, Larry Scott, dropped the ball on the old Pac 12. They had an opportunity when the Big 12, the original Big 12, was about to fold, to bring some of those schools to the West. They didn't do it. Okay. The Pac 12 network was a recipe for disaster from the word go. Most of the country didn't get to see it. Okay. And the thing is like the beginning of the end came, of course, when SC and UCLA decided to leave for the Big Ten. But even with that said, it was still salvageable without SC and UCLA. But I don't think that there was enough assertiveness at the top. There was not a sense of urgency. And because of that, the thing crumbled. Because when people see like things not going the right way, the writing is on the wall. There's always going to be another conference out there trying to court you to say, hey, you know what? Why don't you come play ball with us? That's basically what the Big 12 did. Okay. And you look at, Oregon and Washington, they weren't initially on the Big Ten's radar because the Big Ten had to be convinced about USC and UCLA. It didn't take a lot of convincing, but convincing enough. And then, of course, they brought Oregon and Washington into the fray. Could have had Cal and Stanford, but the Big Ten said no. So getting back to it, I think had a Teresa Gold been in place, we're probably not having this discussion, because maybe, just maybe, the original Pac-12 more than likely got salvaged. But nonetheless, back here in 2025 and the way that things are, you look at this new Pac-12 football wise, you're going to have Boise State, you're going to have Fresno State, Oregon State, Utah State, Colorado State, Texas State, Washington State, and San Diego State. So now we're talking about an 18 football league, more than likely a 7-game conference schedule. Should the new Pac 12 have themselves a championship game? And if so, should it be kept on campus or should they go to a neutral site? I think the Pac 12 is going to go the conference championship game route. Initially, I was only a fan of the conference championship game if you have a big enough league where everybody doesn't play everybody. And of course, that, we saw that, more than 30 years ago when the SEC started this trend when they became the first 12-team football league. Of course, then I totally get it. But I think when the Big 12 was holding on, and this is after A&M and Missouri and Nebraska and Colorado left, and they brought in TCU and West Virginia, and they were a 10-team league. They had a 9-game conference schedule, but they quickly realized the importance of having that conference championship game when they got left out of the cold for that 14 playoff. And both TCU that year, TCU and Baylor missed out, and Ohio State, who won the Big Ten conference championship game, got in. So when it's all said and done, yes, all 8 teams rather are going to play each other once a year. But I still think, the ramifications of a conference championship game are huge, because we don't know. Some people might feel one way, some people might feel another. We don't know if the Pac-12 is going to be recognized as a group of 5 or group of 6, or they're going to remain and or regain their power conference status. I'm not holding out hope to say that the Pac-12 is going to have power conference status once again. Okay, could it happen? You never know. But nonetheless, whatever side of the fence that the new Pac-12 is going to be on, whether it's a power league, a group of six, or group of five league, okay, the conference championship game is still going to be important because if you're in that group of six or group of five, you got to compete with all of those other schools from the group of five to try to get that automatic bid for the college football playoff the way that things stand now. Okay, so with that said, the American has a conference championship game. The Sun Belt, everybody has a conference championship game. So you want to keep up with the Joneses either way. And if you get that power conference status back, everybody has a conference championship game. So again, the committee always remembers you by the last thing that you do, and you don't want to be sitting home idle that week. Now, originally when the Pac-12 went to the conference championship game, it was an on-site thing before they first went to Santa Clara, and then of course they went to Las Vegas. The Mountain West has had a conference championship game in place, and of course Colorado State and company, that's where they're coming from, but it's on site. Okay. I'm not sure what the Pac-12 would want to do about this. I definitely do see them having a conference championship game. I'm not sure if they want to keep it on campus or they want to, have it at a neutral site. I feel like probably the most ideal place would have been having it in Vegas, but you don't have a Nevada team, okay, currently because both UNLV and Nevada are staying in the Mountain West. So we got to wait and see how that happens going forward. But I definitely do think a conference championship game for the new Pac-12 would be in the cards. You look at the basketball aspect of this, and this is important as well because you know Teresa Gold wanted to give the new Pac-12 a football identity as well as a basketball identity. Bringing Gonzaga in is huge because you think about what the Zags have meant to college basketball for the last 25 years or so under head coach Mark Few. You now put them in the same league with a San Diego State, and you ask yourself, is St. Mary's next? I truly do think St. Mary's will leave the West Coast Conference along with Gonzaga to join the new Pac-12. It's one of those where there's really not a lot left for you in the West Coast Conference if you are St. Mary's. Of course, for so many years, St. Mary's and the Zags have been battling at it. And basically, the only thing, or the only team rather, that has prevented St. Mary's from going undefeated, or pardon me, Gonzaga from having an undefeated conference record in the West Coast Conference has been the Gales of St. Mary's. So you definitely would want them in that league. And of course, they fit into that West Coast mix for the most part. Like I said, another question is going to be, will the new Pac-12 be recognized as a power conference or a group of five conference? Like I said, you never say never, but I'm not holding out hope to say that they are going to be a power league. The mediation between the Mountain West and the Pac-12 continues to go on. And of course, that's the legal battle over exit fees, the exit fees that the Mountain West wants the departing schools to pay, poaching fees, and the poaching fees and the exit fees that the Pac-12 feels like they should not have to pay. At the end of the day, there's going to be money exchange between these two leagues. I don't think that either side is going to get completely what they want, hence why it's mediation. But nonetheless, there will be a resolution at some point. The impact of the Pac-12 being whole again on the landscape of the college football playoff, that's going to be a big thing because are they going to be a power conference and get an automatic bid, or are they going to be part of that group of five bunch and have to fight for that bid? That's going to be important right there. A lot of questions about the college football playoff. We know what the SEC and Big Ten are pushing for, and we know what everybody else is fighting against. And me personally, I'm in that category of siding with the people who are fighting against the Big Ten and the SEC. You shouldn't get multiple bids to this college football playoff just because it's one of those, hey, take the top five conference champions and the 11 best teams remaining after that divvy it up and call it a day. But at the end of the day, we got to wait and see how that fills out. But nonetheless, I do think the Pac-12 will definitely have an impact in things. So from this standpoint, they've got 8 full-time members. They've got 9 when you add Gonzaga. I definitely think, you know, bringing in a St. Mary's at least rounds it out to 10. So from a basketball standpoint, somebody is always playing somebody during the league year. And of course, a 10 team, basketball league means, 18 conference games, and you could continue to work outside of there, scheduling partnerships with other leagues. We got to wait and see how that works out. But nonetheless, the Pac 12 is live and awake, and the death of them, I know that it's not going to be the same league that it once was. I'm not going to sit up here and be naive about that, but nonetheless, I still think that this league can have themselves an impact on the West Coast. And I'll tell you like this: for maybe not all of the kids, for football and basketball and the other sports, all of those West Coast kids aren't going to want to travel across the country to play in league games. Some will, okay. Some do it already, but if you're the new Pac-12, and it's kind of the same thing with the Mountain West, it's one of those where, hey, maybe you can get some of those kids, not just for football and basketball, but the other sports, who don't feel like traveling all across the country, because this new Pac-12, they still got a West Coast feel to it, because you got Utah State, Colorado State, Fresno, San Diego State, Washington State, Oregon State. Okay, granted, you're going to have to do some traveling to Texas State. But nonetheless, it's still better traveling wise than having to go across country just to play, in a conference meet or conference games or whatever. Okay, so I think that this league can have an impact on that. But like I said, next step for them is, let's see what the rest of this TV deal looks like. I think it's going to make a lot of sense. I think it's going to turn some heads and make some people say, hey, maybe we should have talked turkey a little bit more with these guys. But nonetheless, Texas State is basically full on board. They've got that Regents meeting coming up. It's going to get approved. Okay, it makes a lot of sense, dollars and cents for them, and of course, it gives them. It's a win-win for everybody, because the Pac-12 is going to be a full-time league now. They get a foot into the talent-rich state of Texas for all sports, and then of course, Texas State. More people are going to know about them being in this league. So it's been a long time coming, if you will, but nonetheless, the Pac 12 is officially back in business. Well done from Oregon State standpoint and Washington State standpoint for not giving up about this thing. And let's see what's the next step for this league after Texas State has partnered up. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you liked what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Hit that like button, as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it is greatly appreciated. Also, if you are on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. The same could be said for Instagram, where you could check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports groups going out there on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.